a state of war.
From war declarations that reshaped nations to economic policies that sparked outrage, some political decisions have left the world divided for decades. These controversial moments weren't just turning points in history, they're still being debated today. And trust me, the stakes behind number 1 will leave you stunned. Today we're diving into the 10 most controversial decisions in global politics. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for more similar videos. The Brexit vote. In 2016, the United Kingdom made the shocking decision to leave the European Union, a move now famously known as Brexit. The decision followed a nationwide referendum where 52% of the voters chose to sever ties with the EU, believing it would reclaim sovereignty and reduce immigration. But the aftermath was anything but smooth. Critics warned that Brexit would damage the UK's economy, and they weren't strong. Supply chains were disrupted, businesses struggled with new trade barriers, and the British pound plummeted to historic lows. Former Prime Minister David Cameron, who had campaigned for the UK to remain in the EU, resigned the day after the vote, stating,
"My resignation, so we'll have a new Prime Minister in that building behind me by Wednesday evening. Thank you very much."
"I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination." Brexit remains one of the most decisive decisions in modern politics, with supporters and critics still fiercely debating whether it was a mistake or a necessary step towards independence. The Iraq War. In 2003, the United States, led by the President George Bush, made the controversial decision to invade Iraq.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people.
The justification, the alleged presence of weapons of mass destruction, which intelligence agencies later admitted were never found. The invasion toppled Saddam Hussein's regime but left Iraq in chaos. The war resulted in over 100,000 civilian deaths, widespread displacement, and the rise of extremist groups like ISIS. Critics argued that the US had acted on faulty intelligence, while others accused the Bush administration of pursuing a hidden agenda involving Iraq's oil reserves. The British Prime Minister Tony Blair, a staunch ally in the war effort, later faced intense backlash, with many calling for him to stand for war crimes. In 2016, Blair admitted in an interview, "The intelligence was wrong. I express more regret, apology, or sorrow than you can ever know." To this day, the Iraq War remains one of the most polarizing decisions in global politics, with its consequences still unfolding. The partition of India. In 1947, British India was divided into two nations, India and Pakistan. The decision was meant to address religious tensions between Hindus and Muslims, but the partition instead unleashed widespread violence and chaos. Over 15 million people were displaced, and an estimated 1 to 2 million people lost their lives in the ensuing riots, massacres, and forced migrations. The division was carried out hastily, with the British lawyer Cyril Ratcliffe drawing borders in just 5 weeks, despite never having set foot in India before. The consequences of this rushed decision are still felt today, as tensions between India and Pakistan remain high, especially over the disputed Kashmir region. The last Viceroy of India, Lord Mountbatten, later described the partition as the most complex problem I have ever faced in my entire life. No matter what we did, the suffering was inevitable. This tragic chapter of history serves as a stark reminder of how political decisions can have devastating human cost. The Cuban Missile Crisis. In October 1962, the world came closer to nuclear war than ever before. The Soviet Union under Nikita Khrushchev placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from US shores. In response, President John F. Kennedy imposed a naval blockade around Cuba, demanding the missiles' removal. For 13 tense days, the world held its breath. The crisis ended with a secret agreement. The US pledged not to invade Cuba and quietly removed missiles from Turkey, while the Soviets dismantled their Cuban missiles. Although the crisis was averted, the decision to go toe-to-toe with the Soviets remained controversial. Many argue that diplomacy, not brickmanship, should have been the first choice. JFK himself later reflected on the lessons learned, stating, "The path we chose was risky, but it was the one that ultimately preserved peace." The Cuban Missile Crisis remains a case study in the dangers of escalation and the importance of negotiation. The establishment of the State of Israel. In 1948, the United Nations approved the establishment of Israel as a Jewish state in Palestine, a move that marked the end of British colonial rule in the region. While the decision was celebrated by Jews around the world, it sparked outrage among Palestinians, who saw the move as an injustice and displacement of their people. The resulting Arab-Israeli war left dead 700,000 Palestinians to flee their homes, a tragedy Palestinians refer to as the Nakba or catastrophe. This event laid the foundation for decades of conflict, with peace in the region remaining elusive to this day. The UN Secretary General described the decision as a monumental step forward for one people, but a complex and painful compromise for another. The establishment of Israel is still one of the most hotly debated topics in global politics, with no resolution in sight. The Berlin Wall construction. In 1961, East Germany, under Soviet influence, erected the Berlin Wall, a physical and ideological barrier separating East and West Berlin. The wall symbolized the height of Cold War, dividing families, friends, and communities for nearly 3 decades. East Germany claimed the wall was necessary to prevent Western spies and fascists from undermining their socialist state. However, the real reason was to stop the mass exodus of East Germans fleeing to the West in search of freedom and better opportunities. President John F. Kennedy famously declared during a visit to West Berlin in 1963, "I am a Berliner." This phrase, meaning "I am a Berliner," became a rallying cry for Western solidarity. When the wall finally fell in 1989, it sparked the beginning of the end of Soviet influence in Europe.
I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
The Kyoto Protocol. In 1997, the world's leaders gathered in Kyoto, Japan to address the growing threat of climate change. The result was the Kyoto Protocol, an international treaty requiring industrialized nations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. While the treaty was hailed as a historic step in environmental policy, it was met with significant backlash. The United States, the world's largest polluter at the time, refused to ratify the agreement, arguing that it unfairly exempted developing nations like China and India. President Bush later stated, "Our focus must be on sustainable solutions that don't hinder economic growth." The Kyoto Protocol's limitation paved the way for future agreements, but it remains a reminder of how difficult global consensus can be. China's one-child policy. In 1979, China introduced its infamous one-child policy to curb population growth. While the policy succeeded in reducing birth rates, it came at a staggering human cost. Families were forced to undergo sterilization, face heavy fines, or in some cases, suffer forced abortions. The policy also created a demographic crisis with a significant gender imbalance due to the preference of male children. By the time it was officially abolished in 2015, China faced an aging population and shrinking workforce. Critics described the policy as a cruel social experiment with long-lasting consequences. While it temporarily addressed overpopulation, the one-child policy remains a chilling example of how far governments will go to control their citizens. The US withdrawal from Afghanistan. In 2021, the United States ended its 20-year military presence in Afghanistan, a move that sparked a global firestorm of criticism. The rapid withdrawal allowed the Taliban to seize control of the country within weeks, leading to chaotic evacuations and humanitarian crisis. President Joe Biden defended the decision, saying, "We went to Afghanistan to eliminate a terrorist threat, and that mission was achieved. Staying any longer would not have changed the outcome." Critics argued that the withdrawal was poorly planned, leaving Afghan allies vulnerable and undoing years of progress. The decision continues to divide opinions worldwide. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In 1945, the United States made the fateful decision to drop atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing over 200,000 people. President Harry Truman justified the bombing, stating that they were necessary to end World War II and save countless American lives. However, the decision sparked a moral and ethical debate that continues to this day. Was it a necessary evil or an act of unparalleled destruction? Survivors of the bombing, known as Hibakusha, described the aftermath as a living hell where everything burned and there was no escape. The bombing remains one of the most controversial decisions in global history, symbolizing both the horrors of war and dawn of the nuclear age. So there you have it, the 10 most controversial decisions in global politics. Which of these decisions shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're curious about turning points in history, check out this video next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.